I think as we are back, I just wanted to, for the purposes of talking to South Africans out there, especially those who may have not been following the deliberations of the committee as we started, just to indicate that right from the beginning of the meeting, one would have clarified that we would have partial closing of the meeting. However, we started firstly with the first item of the committee, which was open to the public. It was a report from USAASA, USAF on the non-achievements as they were identified also by the report of the Auditor General. And we kept that open to the public because there was also nothing to hide in terms of the scrutiny we need to do. I had also presented to the committee the request that was made, and the committee have also received a legal opinion from Parliament, and I've also made similar contacts with the House Chair as advised by the legal department with regard to the item that would partially do in the closed meeting. And that item did not relate to the Auditor General or any disputes with the Auditor General's report. As we begin to hear that that's what's being fed to South Africans. Necessarily, it's been about a turnaround strategy, so referred to the post office of the future, accepting the current challenges that are faced by the post office and how it turns itself to be viable as a post office. That presentation would have not been circulated to members given the sensitivity of the commercial information contained. And of course, the presentation in its nature presents an opportunity for an elaborative way of explaining some of the points so that when members make observations and recommendations, they are quite aware of what is involved. And I want to confirm that the committee would have agreed to that. There's not been a dissenting view. In fact, it became quite clearer as the presentation would have been made that indeed part of the information that's presented may have created problems not only for the entity, but also for those that relate commercially to the entity. Therefore, in my view, it is in strict conforming to the rules of the House, 184 in particular, and that discretion has not just been applied as said in item 20 of the legal opinion we've received, but one sought to get the committee to agree. So that's how we would have agreed to proceed in that way. However, because the post office remains an important entity to South Africans, especially your outlying areas that have experienced problems of the post office as their main entry point to services of government. We then agreed also that whilst we may have not had the presentation details put publicly, we should also make reflections on the observations of made, as well as the recommendations we are making in attaining that post office of the future as per the presentation. And that would also formally issue a statement of the committee on those views, just to ensure that even those that may have not been following the discussions of the committee would also pick that up in the statement that the committee would make. So I just thought it's important that one makes that point. And this would have not been for the first time we are faced with such a situation. When we're dealing with the turnaround strategy of the SABC, on matters that related to commercial, we had made a similar application, and that's how we handled the matters in that score. So it won't be about anything else, but to make sure that we do not put the entity in an unfair situation or in a disadvantage as far as commercial interests are concerned. And I hope that clarifies the matter, and that South Africans could be given proper information of what really happened. But of course, for those South Africans who are following the discussions, whether from Parliament, YouTube streaming, they would have picked up at what point did we close and what were the conditions of that, and we're adhering to those. Just to indicate that from a point of the observations that we have made, having received the presentation, firstly, as I said, indeed, it became clear that we needed to agree to the protection of commercial interest if the turnaround strategy of getting the post office out of its current challenges and finally get to be profitable, that we needed to go that route. But secondly, that our understanding is quite clear that there have been many turnaround strategies presented by the post office. What has been lacking has been the implementation. And we've come to a realization, as the presentation would have given us the information available, that indeed, without funding the strategy, there would be challenges of implementation. It doesn't matter how many boards, how many executives you bring on board, need assistance to get out of its challenges. Of course, quite clearly that whatever funding you look at, it should not be about throwing it to problems, but it must be about the implementation of the strategy such that the post office is able to run on its own. We've also noted the gaps which may need to be looked at in terms of learning from the previous situations, that the Treasury, the social development may also need to be met, whether at portfolio level or meeting the necessary departments, just to ensure that there is support for the turnaround strategy to be realized. Of course, that will also give an opportunity to make a reflection on why the other strategies didn't work even at the time that there were bailouts that were given to them. So that there's also accountability for what we do and what we say in order to get these appropriations made to the institutions. So that's really that. But the last point would be that we've also made this point that even if we receive the money, we would also have to prove beyond reasonable doubt that there's capacity in SAPO, starting from the board and the vacancies that exist in the executives, that they are in line with such a strategy for it to be really implemented. And of course, our recommendations are quite clear, having made those observations, that one, the committee indeed supports the turnaround strategy, and from what has been presented, if supported also from a point of funding and there's implementation, the post office should be able to turn around, of course, with the support on all the things that need to happen to make it work. The other point we would have raised is that indeed, like I said, we would need the support from Treasury, the social development to also just deal with some of the matters that needs to be dealt with on the delivery of services on behalf. Would need to look at that. Of course, support that we do need a joint project team that involves Treasury, social development, be in that, as well as the department, just to make sure that SAPO is indeed focused on its implementation of the strategy. This also means revising the corporate strategy of SAPO to really focus on the implementation of the turnaround strategy, and that the committee would then be briefed in terms of milestones in the delivery of that turnaround strategy by SAPO. Of course, from the committee side, having looked at the funding that goes to universal service obligations and the presentation made by SAPO, we would want that as part of a discussion with Treasury. A funding model is something to consider in order to ensure that those are not compromised. As one would have said, our recognition of SAPO is that it's at this point the main entry point on government services, especially in the rural areas where our people are found. So in that score, we would really expect that there would be support for a look on the funding model given the presentation that we have received. So we'd expect a movement in that regard. And this is the point, unfortunately, that we would have also made when we were dealing with the SABC as it relates to the part of SABC being a public broadcaster that must give public broadcasting services without depending on commercial interest that comes through the commercial arm. I think that's an important point to still make as we deal with SAPO in this regard. So this in the main is what we would call the summary of the observations and recommendations we've made. And indeed, at the implementation level, we'll still keep the South Africans quite aware of what is happening. And we have really made it a point that we really encourage the minister, the board, and the executives in SAPO that as we do this, like we observed, we should really ensure that labor is taken on board and all other stakeholders are taken on board so that we all move together in getting the post office of tomorrow that we are looking at that is relevant with times, but giving excellent service to our people. So that's really the summary. As I said, we'll also issue out the statement of the committee in this regard. Thanks, honorable members. That concludes that item. We are left with two very short items. First item being the minutes, and the last item is on adoption of reports for appointments in the SABC board, MDDA board, and the ICASA council. Ajura, if you can flight those.
Minutes 1st of March, Chairperson.
Honorable members, we are now in the minutes of the 1st of March. We're now on observations. Recommendations. Can I then get a mover? 1 second.
Chairperson, I so move.
Honorable Bulan, can I then have a second?
A second, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Kumbu, for seconding. Can we get to the next set of minutes? The minutes of the 8th. If there are no corrections to be made, may I also get a mover and seconder? Can I get a mover and seconder for the 8th?
I so move, Chairperson.
Honorable Budani moves. Can I get a seconder?
I second, Chairperson.
Seconded by the Honorable Dr. Basso. So the minutes have been seconded. Ajara.
The next item will be dealt with by Thembi Kosi, Chairperson.
All right, thank you. Mr. Ngoma, as I said, then there would be a presentation of the reports for adoption. These reports would have been circulated to honorable members so as to better prepare for the committee. These are reports emanating from the subcommittees appointed in terms of the rules of the National Assembly by the committee, which provides that a committee could appoint a subcommittee to focus on a particular task but report to the committee, for which the committee will be able to report back to the House when the data arises. In this score, we would have had vacancies in the MDDA board, like I said, then the SABC, as well as the ICASA council. Would then, given the fact that the reports were circulated to members, will then flag the report and allow Mr. Ngoma to read through the reports so that we are also sure we have the same reports, and will then move on each of them for actual formal adoption of the report, which report will then be able to send to the House. Mr. Ngoma, I'm sure you are ready.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Yes, indeed, I am ready. Good afternoon, Chairperson member, Honorable Minister, colleagues and guests. Chairperson, before you is the draft report, which will, upon the adoption of it by this committee, become a report of the Committee on Communications on the filling of 2 vacancies on the Media Development and Diversity Agency Board, the MDDA, dated 15 March 2022. The Portfolio Committee on Communications, having considered the request from the Minister in the Presidency, Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation in respect of the 2 MDDA board vacancies, reports as follows. A letter dated 26 May 2020 was received from the Minister in the Presidency, informing the National Assembly of the expiry of terms of office of Dr. Nombeko Mbava and Ms. Martina Della Togna on the board of the Media Development and Diversity Agency in October 2020. and requesting the National Assembly to initiate the process to fill the vacancies in terms of the MDDA Act, Act number 14 of 2002. The committee considered the letter from the Minister in the Presidency and resolved that the Secretariat may proceed with the process of publishing an advertisement in the media calling for the nomination of persons to fill the 2 vacancies on the MDDA board. The advertisement was published in all 11 official languages in 2 national newspapers, 2 regional newspapers, and 7 community media newspapers, and 56 nominations were received. Chairperson, I just want to repeat this part that 7 community media newspapers were used to advertise for these 2 vacancies. The committee further established a 7-member subcommittee consisting of 4 members from the ANC, 1 member from the DA, 1 member from the EFF, and 1 member from the Inkatha Freedom Party to oversee the process of filling the 2 vacancies on the MDDA board and report back to it. On 31st August 2021, the subcommittee met to consider the criteria and skills required to fill the vacancies and unanimously recommended that the committee approve the following shortlisted candidates: Ms. Martina de la Togna, Dr. Nombeko Mbava, Ms. Carol Muhlala, Mr. Luzu Kobuku, Ms. Blaise Kutsi, Mr. Lionel Adendorf, Mr. Louis Siko, Mr. Raylan Fisher, Mr. Posa Mashangwane, Professor Siasanga Charlie, Ms. Nalini Maharaj, Mr. Masimene Lisiba, and Ms. Amandle Mukubung. On 1 September 2021, the committee adopted the recommendation of the subcommittee, and the candidates were interviewed on the 3rd and the 7th of September in 2021, with the exception of Dr. Nombeko Mbava, who withdrew from the process following her appointment to the Financial Fiscal Commission. All candidates' qualifications were verified with the Parliament's Human Resources Unit, and they came out positive, and the personal suitability checks were conducted with the State Security Agency. On 10 March 2022, the subcommittee met and deliberated on the interviews and unanimously agreed to recommend to the committee that Ms. Martina de la Togna and Ms. Carol Muhlala be appointed to fill the 2 vacancies on the MDDA board. On 15th March 2022, which is today, the committee met to consider the recommendation of the subcommittee, and the committee unanimously recommends that the National Assembly approve the names of Ms. Martina de la Togna and Ms. Carol Muhlala for appointment to the MDDA board for a full 4-year term. This report, if adopted, will be tabled to the National Assembly for consideration. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Koma, for the presentation. As I said, the report would have been circulated to members well in advance after the subcommittee would have looked at the report. May I now invite members who want to speak on the report, if there are any corrections to be made, and so on, or clarities in that score, before we get to move on the report. You will help me, Mr. Ngoma, if I do not see any person on my side. Otherwise, I do not see any member would want clarity or correction on anything. May I then, for formality, get a mover and seconder for the adoption of this report?
I move, Chairperson.
Yes.
Honorable Majosi moves. Can I get a seconder? Can I get a seconder?
Honorable Kubera, seconded.
Honorable Kubeka seconds. Any objection to the adoption of the report? No objection, the report is agreed to. We'll now get to the next report on the SABC. Mr. Ngoma.
Thank you very much, Chairperson and honorable members. Chairperson, this is a draft report of the Portfolio Committee on Communications on the filling of a vacancy on the South African Broadcasting Corporation SABC board, dated 15 March 2022. The Portfolio Committee on Communications, having considered the request from the Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies to fill a vacancy on the SABC board, reports as follows. A letter dated 22 July 2020 was received from the Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies, informing the National Assembly of the resignation of Ms. Benedict Muthian from the board of the SABC and requesting the National Assembly to recommend, in accordance with the provisions of the Broadcasting Act 1999, Act 4 of 1999, a suitable candidate to fill the above mentioned vacancy for the unexpired portion of the period for which the vacating board member had been appointed for. The committee considered the letter from the Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies and resolved that the Secretariat may proceed with the process of publishing an advertisement in the media calling for the nomination of persons to fill a vacancy on the SABC board. The advertisement was published in all 11 South African official languages in 2 national newspapers, 2 regional newspapers, and 7 community media newspapers, and 69 nominations were received. Chairperson, what we always try and do when we have adverts, a number of adverts going out, is when the advertising agency will often request them that they split the adverts among the various community newspapers, at the same time ensuring that all the regions are covered. The committee further established a 7-member subcommittee consisting of 4 ANC members, 1 DA, 1 EFF, 1 IFP, to oversee the process of filling the vacancy on the SABC board and report back to it. On 31st August 2021, the subcommittee met to consider the criteria and skills required to fill the vacancy and unanimously recommended that the committee approve the following shortlisted candidates: Mr. Mpotsedu, Dr. Nombeko Mbava, Ms. Nalini Maharaj, Ms. Barbara Sangweni, Dr. Renee Horn, and Ms. Sinamile Masango. On 1 September 2021, the committee adopted the recommendation of the subcommittee. The candidates were interviewed on Friday, 3 September 2021, with the exception of Dr. Nombeko Mbava, who withdrew from the process following her appointment to the Financial Fiscal Commission. All candidates' qualifications were verified with Parliament's Human Resources Unit, and personnel suitability checks were conducted with the State Security Agency. On 10 March 2022, the subcommittee met and deliberated on the interviews and unanimously agreed to recommend to the committee that Dr. Renee Horn be appointed to fill the vacancy on the SABC board for the remainder of the term of the member that has vacated. On 15 March 2022, the committee met to consider the recommendation of the subcommittee. The committee unanimously recommends that the National Assembly approves the name of Dr. Renee Horn for appointment to the SABC board for the unexpired portion of the period for which the vacating board member had been appointed, which ends on 26 September 2022. Same as the previous report, Chairperson. Once this report is adopted by this committee, it will be tabled to the National Assembly for consideration and approval. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Ngoma. Honorable members, like we did to the previous one, I'll check if there are members who want to make any corrections or comments at this point, or we formally move for the adoption of the report. You will also assist me, Mr. Ngoma, that I do not leave anybody behind.
Chairperson, from my side, I don't see any hands.
I don't see any hands. May I then get a member to move and a seconder in that score for the adoption of the report? Can I get a mover?
I move that the report, Mr. Chair.
Honorable Gombo moves. May I get a seconder?
Chairperson, I so second.
Ojani seconds. May I just check if there's any objection in us adopting this report? No objection. The report is agreed to. Then this takes us to
Should I proceed, Chair?
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Honorable members, this is the third report of the Portfolio Committee on Communications on the filling of 4 vacancies on the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa, ICASA Council, dated 15 March 2022. The Portfolio Committee on Communications, having considered requests from the Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies to fill 4 vacancies on the ICASA Council, reports as follows. A letter was received from the Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies informing the National Assembly of the resignation with immediate effect of Mr. Zolani Khosi Matthews, a councillor on the Council of ICASA. In addition to the resignation of Mr. Matthews, the Minister informed the Speaker of the terms of office of 3 other councillors that would expire on 20 September 2021. That was in reference to Ms. Palisa Kadi, 25 September 2021, in reference to Advocate Dimakazo Kocha, and 31 January 2022, in reference to Ms. Tembe Gasimane, respectively. The Minister requested the Speaker to initiate the recruitment process in terms of Section 5(1) of the ICASA Act to fill the vacancy that had arisen as a result of the resignation and the vacancies that would arise on the expiry of the terms of office of the 3 councillors that I've mentioned earlier. The committee considered the letters from the Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies and resolved that the Secretariat may proceed with the process of publishing an advertisement in the media calling for the nomination of persons to fill the 4 vacancies on the ICASA Council. The advertisement was published in all 11 South African official languages, in 2 national newspapers, 2 regional newspapers, and 7 community media newspapers. The committee received 71 nominations, but considered only 69 nominations during shortlisting, following the withdrawal of Ms. Abongile Mashele and Mr. Lumko Mtimde from the nomination process. The committee further established a 7-member subcommittee, 4 African National Congress, 1 Democratic Alliance, 1 Economic Freedom Fighters, and 1 Inkatha Freedom Party to oversee the process of the filling of the 4 vacancies on the ICASA Council and report back to it. On 31 August 2021, the subcommittee met to consider the criteria and skills required to fill the vacancies and unanimously recommended that the committee approve the following shortlisted candidates: Mr. Edmund Baloyi, Ms. Tigeledi Mushi, Mr. Demetrios Martins, Ms. Palisa Likhoze, Ms. Caroline Macharia, Mr. Mpotsedu, Advocate Dimakazo Kocha, Dr. Natalie Skippers, Mr. Charles Mabuza, Ms. Rosana Jel, Mr. Ashraf Patel, Ms. Tabi Safaye, Ms. Ndombiza Sitole, Mr. Musa Silo, Ms. Sese Tukomo, Dr. Pulane Mulukwane, Ms. Tembe Gasimane, Mr. Leon Low, Ms. Keletso Lifutane, Ms. Nomputuko Nontombana, Ms. Nokwanda Matendra, Mr. Thabo Makhache, and Dr. Olwethu Siphuka. On 1 September 2021, the committee adopted the recommendation of the subcommittee, and the candidates were interviewed on the 7th, 8th, and 10th September 2021, with the exception of Dr. Olwethu Siphuka, Ms. Caroline Macharia, and Ms. Kilitso Lifutane, who all withdrew from the process, citing different reasons. All candidates' qualifications were verified with Parliament's Human Resources Unit, and personnel suitability checks were conducted with the State Security Agency. On 10 March 2022, the subcommittee met and deliberated on the interviews and unanimously agreed to recommend to the committee that the 4 vacancies be filled from the following 7 candidates: Advocate Dimakazo Kocha, Ms. Nomputuko Nontombana, Ms. Digeledi Mushi, Ms. Tabi Safaye, Ms. Ndombiza Sitole, Ms. Sese Tukomo, and Ms. Rosana Jel. Yes, Chairperson, the titles are not the mistake. It's all Miss. Yes, Chairperson. To be appointed to fill the 4 vacancies on the ICASA Council, and although the ICASA Act states that the National Assembly must submit to the Minister a list of suitable candidates at least 1.5 times the number of councillors to be appointed, the subcommittee agreed to add to the list the name of Ms. Rosana Jel as a 7th candidate. The decision to submit 7 names was made mainly to assist the appointing authority in appointing from the same pool in an event that one of the appointed councillors vacated office few months after the appointment. This was evident from the vacancy which arose as a result of Mr. Zolani Khosi Matthews' resignation, which occurred just few months after he was appointed to the council. We all know that at the time he was then appointed to PRASA as the Chief Executive Officer. Chairperson, on 15 March 2022, the committee met to consider the recommendation of the subcommittee. The committee unanimously recommends that the National Assembly approve the names of Advocate Dimakatso Kocha, Ms. Nompultuko Nontombana, Ms. Dikeledi Mushi, Ms. Tabisa Faye, Ms. Ntombiza Sitole, Ms. Sesetu Komo, and Ms. Rosanna Gel for submission to the Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies in order for her to appoint 4 from the 7 candidates as ICASA councillors. Chairperson, thank you very much. That is the report of the committee, which will also be tabled to the National Assembly for consideration and adoption. Chairperson, also just safe to mention that from the reports that I've just gone through it looks like the committee has appointed only a miss. So 7, so the candidates, Chairperson, all female that the committee is recommending for appointment to these boards. Thank you, Chairperson.
Mr. Ngoma, I now see that Honorable Machozi's hand is up. She would want to make comments or correction.
Yes, Chairperson. Can Mr. Ngoma check if the other one is not Mrs. Sitole? Because I heard him saying the titles are the same, they are all Miss. But I remember that in the CV there's a Mrs., not a Miss. So they might all be females, but that is the difference, the title.
No,
Mr. Ngoma would respond to this Honorable Machos. I think it's purely from a point of formality. But you can proceed, Mr. Ngoma.
Definitely, Chair. It's purely from the point of formality. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Matrosi, for raising that. It was just meaning that it was an excitement, just meaning that this committee has just been has recommended female candidates for appointment to this board. So thank you very much, Ms. Matrosi. It's yes, Mrs. Ntombiza Sitole. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. No, thank you, Mr. Ngoma, and I'm sure there is an explanation in terms of how we got to 7 in this one, which we think the House would consider. You'd remember, honorable members, I'm doing this especially for those that do not sit in the subcommittee, because I did this in the subcommittee, that we had a to and fro process for quite long on the appointment at that time. And it would have not been surprising, therefore, that people may consider other options available to them, and then that's go ahead a resignation within a month. In this case, looking at the time it has taken for us to complete this task, people may have already looked at other options, like we received declines, as the reports would say earlier. So we may have a similar situation in this regard, where you would exhaust the list, but still find that other people may be looking at other offerings that would have been made to them. That the process of filling in just a vacancy or 2 can be also quite costly in terms of firstly the time, the importance of ensuring stability in the council itself, but also from a cost point of view, that you run a similar process within a short space of time, and the costs are not changing based on number that you put up for admit. So all these were considerations of the committee, as I say, including financial prudence, as we use the resources of the state collected from the people. So it's just important to emphasize that point. But I'll now go, because Honorable Machoso would have already spoken to corrections. May I then get a mover for adoption of the report and a seconder? Can I get a mover and a seconder?
Chairperson, I move Honorable Kupega for the adoption of the report with those corrections. Thank you.
Honorable Kubega is moved for the adoption of the report. I get a seconder. I hope I'm audible. And that there is no member who is speaking to himself or herself because of being muted.
Chairperson, I so second.
Honorable Bodlani seconds. Is that Mr. Ngoma? Yes, Mr. Ngoma?
Yes, it's me, Chairperson. Thank you very much, Chairperson. If you remember earlier when I indicated that Mr. Matisha could not connect to the meeting, I indicated that he had a message for this part of the agenda of the committee. He requested that I indicate to this committee that he supports all three reports of the committee that he had received via the email, and support the appointment of all the candidates that I mentioned on the reports on behalf of the Congress of the People. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Ngoma. We indeed have forgotten that point. It's important for our record, especially because he didn't sit in the subcommittees, but would have received the report well on time and made a view there. So there is support for the report, but for formality and recording, I now have to check if there's any objection to the adoption of this report by the committee. So no objection, the report is agreed to and therefore would be sent to the House for consideration. Hajira and Mr. Ngoma, I take it that that was the last item for the meeting.
Yes, Chairperson, it was the last item. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you. Once again, I must say thank you, honorable members. I see that the minister is still on the platform. We also thank you, Minister, for coming through and be with the committee as we're going through all the other items from the first one up to now. We also really thank our members of civil society, department, and people from entities who are with us, and those that link us to South Africans in the form of the media, that you've been taking interest in the discussions of the committee. And I want to use this opportunity to once again put the point that it is in our interest to keep South Africans informed of what we do. And that's why I would issue statements where the need arises. And we want to assure South Africans that whenever we would make decisions to either partially close the meeting, we would ensure at all times we follow due processes, one of them being that of complying with the rules as adopted by Parliament and publicized in that scope for South Africans to know them. But as I said, we'll just ensure that the public is informed as these entities or departments are about the people, and as true representatives of the people elected from different political parties in this committee in particular. Our approach has always been to put the people of the country first and put our party lines on the sides. And I take it that in most instances, those party lines would be on the basis that they agree to putting the South Africans' interest first. So that's how we are keeping it. And I'm also happy that it's reflected in the adoption of the reports by the committee, having been deliberated even in the subcommittees, and put a unanimous voice before South Africans that indeed we always consider South Africans that come before the committee, especially on appointment of boards. But Mr. Ngoma, you've raised a very important point that just from the MDDA up until ICASA, indeed it was about gender equality today for a sustainable tomorrow in practice, and hope that South Africans do appreciate that women are considered also looking at the skills and how they perform in interviews, not just because they are women, but because they equally can be in these boards and help the country to move forward. With that, thanks, honorable members. This concludes the business of this meeting. The meeting stays adjourned until we meet again as you rush to the house. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair.